Are we good? Can I go? Okay. So yeah, this course was it was way more than I ever thought like it could be, on all different levels. Like the building itself was way more than I thought it would be, even though you even said everything we were gonna do. You know, we're gonna learn this, we're gonna learn that, we're gonna learn this. But then when we actually start learning it, the depths that you shared was more than I thought it was going to be. Like the way that you taught it in a way that was so, just like patient and open and understanding on what anyone's level was. Like, I don't think there was never a moment where I think anyone felt stupid for not knowing something we were talking about, because you were so open of a teacher and so compassionate of a teacher. So as far as like the building things goes, like when you say from beginning to end, like you meant it, and we left. I mean, I don't understand why anyone would leave the second week unless they just really couldn't. But like you should make a point to stay the second week because you get to actually then see it more finished and see how like possible it is. So there's that level of the class that it was just more information than I thought I was ever going to leave with. And then there's just like the spiritual aspect of the class, everyone being on a similar spiritual path. And that's what it all is like we're all on a path, and seeing somebody else's way of looking at it, like help opening your perspective and learning from the other students themselves. Like everyone was just learning all the time about so many different things. It wasn't just a place to come and learn how to build a house. Like it was a place to come and learn how to build yourself, and that was more than I bargained for. But like in a really welcome place. Definitely in where I am in my own personal life, this was exactly what I needed. To see that other people are out there like valuing this and trying to build a new reality, like build a new world. And I really do think that this is part of the revolution, and these are real tools. These are real accessible and forgiving tools, no matter what your pocketbook is, no matter what your constructive background is. Like this is something that's attainable for just about everybody, no matter where you are. And that's something really special. Like you don't really have that in any of the other things. And the speed that it can go up with is such a game changer, as far as things happen really quick, and how quickly you can shelter people with this is really important. And so, yeah, it was just a multifaceted experience that went into way more depth on all of the levels than I thought that it would. And yeah, I just feel like extremely blessed to have been a part of it. And I just really can't wait to see what I end up doing with it and how I can end up helping myself and helping others and sharing with this with as many people as possible, because I think that it really can make a grand difference in the big picture of everyone's life. Everything's just logistics. And this helps with the bottom rung of Maslow's hierarchy and the logistics behind that. And that's a game changer, So, yeah, this is like a highly recommended course for anybody if you're interested in changing the game, for yourself, for the collective. So I just want to say thanks. Come make yourself a couple of friends. No matter the weather, you'll live safely in your AirCrete shelter. Leaving Babylon and Rome for your true home. Come build with me. Let's build
with me with AirCrete. Come build with me.
Hello, I hope you can hear me. Alright, can anybody hear me? If you can, say something in the chat so I know I'm not just talking to myself here. Alright, good. So, any other questions I can answer for you guys? Hope y'all are having a good day. I'm just kind of swimming here as I figure out some of this streaming stuff and how to switch it. Okay, so attaching the wood for the windows and doors is typically bolted to the foundation. You know, you want your door frames, your window frames, of course, to be immovable, nice and strong. That way you can run in and out of the house and slam the door as many times as you feel is necessary. So basically we double up on the wood, we make it extremely sturdy, and it's bolted to the floor, but also at the top it's bolted and attached to the bond beam, which is a cement and steel bond that goes around the entire top of the structure. That beam serves as not only an attachment point, but as a connection to every part of the AirCrete wall, and what that does is distribute the weight. Let's see if I can find some pictures here maybe. Oh, I forgot to turn off the media source. Alright, there's the video camera. Now let's see if I can find some kind. There we go. I got a video capture here. I'll try to share screen. Northern Arizona. Are you up there where the trees are nice and lush and green, where the snow falls and the enormous deer like to play, or are you a little further south? Okay, so right here, back to the bond beam for a second. You see the blue strip up here on top of the wall. Behind this blue strip of foam board is a cement and steel bond beam that goes all the way around. So that's what the roof attaches to. That's what the doors and windows attach to. This gives you a place to put, you know, a standard roof if you like. You know, out here in the Southwest, we're doing kind of, you know, the romantical Southwestern adobe imitation look, but you know, I would never actually recommend a flat roof in any climate other than the desert, because honestly I've never seen a flat roof that didn't leak. that's not playing like I need it to. So as far as how AirCrete holds up in wet areas, it holds up just fine. You know, like any structure that you build, you have to actually waterproof it. So, you know, with a conventional house, that might be brick. More often than not, it's probably paint. So you never leave the AirCrete exposed to the elements, just like you would never leave siding exposed to the elements. Because first of all, you know, you don't want water infiltrating into the edge of the AirCrete, especially on freezing nights and whatnot. Because freezing nights, if it gets cold enough to freeze the water in the wall, it can actually chip or break or crack the AirCrete. Now, that's not just an AirCrete thing. That even applies to regular cement. If you have wet cement and it freezes hard, it'll even chip that stuff. So typically, you know, we're going to seal these things up really good with an elastomer paint. That's a paint that's basically like a plastic, and it's very stretchy. It'll actually stretch like 200 to 400% without any tears in it. And most importantly, it's also made to bond to high alkali cement, stucco, and mortar. So there's several brands of that paint, but yeah, it holds up just fine as long as you keep a good paint job on the house. So yeah, does that answer your question? I hope. Oh yeah, aquaponics greenhouse. That's definitely on the to-do list here. Aquaponics, it's really nice because, you know, if you use aluminum frame greenhouses, we've been doing aquaponics since before it even had a name. I guess back then it was called aquaculture with plants. And you know, the cement itself holds up very well to the moisture. I would still seal it with a good paint. Because again, you want to keep the moisture out for hard freezes, but it definitely works really well and it's insulating. And if you're going to go with say a passive solar greenhouse design, then it's actually very nice to have insulation on the north, the east, and the west, and even halfway or a quarter of the way over the top, and only have glass to the south, because basically that lets you put a lot more heat in the structure. And if you put, you know, cool tubes down into the ground and you suck that heat off of the top, you can actually pull that down into the earth and warm the ground, and then the heat will just kind of rise up slowly overnight into the structure. And when you're basically surrounded by AirCrete, it actually insulates the structure. And if you use like a 2 or 3 layer polycarbonate on that greenhouse, then it actually stays above freezing in most climates. You know, I'd actually love to build one big enough to be able to put a banana tree or a papaya or a mango. Of course, that would be a rather large house, but maybe we'll get to do that one day. Yeah, you can use AirCrete in a greenhouse built with timbers. It's very important, I guess, to pick your timber so that it can withstand the high moisture content, because it is humid inside of greenhouses. So as long as you pick something or properly seal the wood, there'd be no problems with that whatsoever. And you can just kind of infill the wall in place of fiberglass insulation. And you know, AirCrete, even though the surface will get wet, like once the blocks have really dried, I've actually taken blocks and dunked them into a 30-gallon trash can full of water, and I've let them sit for 2 weeks. And then when I sliced the block open, it was actually only wet probably a quarter of an inch into the block. So it stands up very well. Hey Edwin, yep, 20 minutes from the mountains. That's nice. Northern Arizona was definitely another area that I had looked at. Ultimately, I chose this part of the world for a number of reasons. Now, newer used solar panels, if you can get a really good deal on used solar panels, that's actually not a bad way to go. But you need to know how long they've been used, because, um, some of the used solar panels are actually just things that have been put on a solar farm, and then when they added a tariff to the Chinese imports, they just canceled the whole project. And then they're used, but only very lightly, or maybe not actually used at all. But basically, you have a 20-year warranty, and by 20 years out, you're going to be running 80% or less of what that panel's rated. So I would probably want to know the history of a used panel, and how much lifespan I could expect. And there's certainly nothing wrong with getting started with a good used solar panel, if that helps you get going. In fact, I even started with not only some used solar panels, but also some surplus lithium ion batteries. Like over at Battery Hookup, they have some, I think they're 8 point something kilowatt hour batteries right now, and the price is really pretty amazing considering how much storage you get. But again, a lot of those batteries have also been run down, into that 80% range of their life. When you buy solar panels, don't get them at full retail price. Always look somewhere like Sun Elec or some other place that sells them. You should be able to get brand new solar panels somewhere between 32 and 64 cents per watt. And so sometimes when you weigh out the bulk price, it's really a better deal to get brand new solar panels and brand new batteries, because then you have a nice long lifespan. But again, if you're just getting started, there's nothing wrong with using a used solar panel if it can meet your needs. So Orlando, yeah, good old Orlando, Florida. There's a place that I've only been through one time. Yeah, last year's April workshop, we had a number of issues there. But yeah, so you made AirCrete last night for the first time, and it didn't go well. Do you want to share what exactly did not go well? Did it deflate? What soaps were you using? What was your ratios of soap and water? Freaking Dave, high in the desert. Yep, I like high desert. One of the beautiful things about high desert is the fact that it cools off so well at night. It's very easy to use passive heating and cooling in a climate like that, especially with lower humidities. And we'll see if I can find some more videos here. Well, any more questions any of you guys have? Let's see, open file location, there we go. Let's go back over here to I'll get better at this at some point. Now,
typically on these
Here's
structures, once we
a
reach the top
little
of the
video just real quick
81
on the
and a
bond
half
beam.
inch
This is
door
another
frame,
structure, but
we put the
basically
bond
you
beam
see
on.
right here
And the
that
cement
the bond
bond
beam
beam is exactly that.
poured
It
in
is a
place cement. Now
rock.
this is a very small structure, so it just happens to be that it's only about 3.5 inches tall, and there's only a couple pieces of rebar in there. But this is what allows you to not only attach your roofs, but also set floor joist if you want to do second floors. So, have you had any building inspectors take courses from you, and what was the outcome? No, I've not had any building inspectors take the course. They're generally not particularly interested in something new, honestly. They kind of have their job and they have to go by the codes. So unfortunately, you know, getting around building inspection is a unique challenge because you have to first of all find a building inspector that's willing to comprehend and understand things. And I know we call this stuff AirCrete, but it's not AirCrete. It's actually codified as cellular cement. And so there are codes, there are standards and strengths and engineering data on the subject. But the difference between AirCrete and the commercial product known as AAC, or autoclaved aerated cement, is that the AAC is cured under heat and steam, so it gets a very consistent and uniform project. And so when you make it yourself, you know, depending on what's going on, like out here, for example, I could expect a normal house to cure up to 170 pounds per square inch, but when it comes to out here in the desert where it's super dry, if I let this stuff dry out, it's never going to get as hard as it should or could. Is it good enough for a building? I think it is. But, you know, when you're talking about building inspectors, it's about a set of codes and a set of standards that's repeatable. Because ultimately, when you're asking somebody for permission to do something in your life, Toby has to ask for permission. And with that permission also comes responsibility. If, for example, you built something substandard and an inspector gave you permission and then it fell in on your head, he could maybe be in trouble a little bit and be risking his job. Now, probably a lot of them will be fine because actually they typically tell you to go to an engineer, and the engineer is supposed to be able to look at the engineering, the strengths, the weights, the loads, and then decide if it's safe. And if it is, he should be able to put his engineering stamp on your paper. You should be able to take it back and get it done. However, I have found very few engineers out there who are actually doing alternative engineering at all. They don't even know where to look. They ask me, well, where's the scientific test? Where's the laboratory data? Well, it's all in the code book, and apparently that's too much for a lot of engineers to look up. So finding a good engineer can be a real problem. Now, I know there's a couple of engineering companies out there who deal solely with alternative buildings. So I'll try to make a video and put the link up to those guys at some point in the near future so that you can actually maybe reach out and talk to such guys. About the only other thing you can do is ask for a code variance, you know, like they do in New Mexico and Arizona and certain places. You'll see if you kind of, well, even like straw bale. Yes, straw bale can absolutely hold up a roof. But generally, the code people are going to want to see beams put up all the way down the house to be able to support the roof overhead. And if you build like that, often you can get a variance with the code department, provided that they realize that what you're putting is non-load bearing loose or just non-load bearing insulation. And if they're reasonable at all, they'll certainly work with you like that. Now, I do have to mention, if you're hiring someone to build your house, there's very few companies that are going to be building alternative structures because, quite frankly, they don't know anything about it and they're not interested in learning anything about it. and they certainly don't want the liability for mistakes, because when you're building something that's not, approved, then you're taking on more risk, and so it's just not worth it to a lot of companies. Plus, they'd have to train up a new skill set, and very few companies or even employees, for that matter, are willing to do that. So, and as far as the land of the free, here's the thing about the land of the free. You're as free as you choose to be. Consent comes from the governed. If you're asking for permission, if you're saying, yes, sir, I'll obey, if you're going to be kente kunte, or are you going to be the submissive person? You see, it always takes two for slavery. And we don't operate under the Constitution in general in this country, because we're operating under administrative law and admiralty law. And unless you take the responsibility, then there is no freedom. And that's something we do teach in our courses. We cover the basics of the language, what to expect, what to say, how to respond, and try to open your eyes to comprehending or overstanding what it is that we're dealing with. Because actually, I would have no problem building one of these for myself, because I can stand up for myself without a court officer known as a bar attorney who has his boys club card from London. So you have to be able to stand upon your own, because after all, even if you're going to use an attorney, then you've attorned your rights, and you've shown that you're mentally incompetent, and therefore, you're a ward of the state. So it's all in the actions you take and the programming you stick to, and how you educate yourself, because it is possible to go completely around this stuff. We've done it, but you have to know what and why, and you have to fully comprehend and be able to stand on your square, if you will, to be able to defend that position. Because if you go in there and they ask you a question like, well, somebody says, or I saw this thing on the internet, that's not good enough. You have to really know where you stand. If you want freedom, it has to be taken, because freedom is not free. Any tips on keeping AirCrete from collapsing, such as adding entrainment elements for emulsification suspension? Okay, so collapsing AirCrete can be, first of all, what is your water quality? Out here, we have very hard mineral water, and so what we have to do is we have to use rainwater to make the foam that inflates the cement so that the bubbles are strong, and then we can use the regular well water to be able to actually mix the cement with, and that decreases the impurities, and only testing will tell. The other thing is, what soap are you using, and how much soap are you using, and also you can't, even with Drexel, it's an agricultural foaming agent, and I've gotten a lot of Friday batches, and that means basically I get a gallon and the whole thing is useless. I may be able to save it by adding some vegetable glycerin. Also, if you didn't shake those bottles really good before you started, it's possible that it's separated and all the good stuff came to the top and you poured it out, and you may have got one good batch and then it gets bad on you. All right, so if you got a question about second stories, go ahead and ask. Have you attempted to use bamboo in the place of rebar reinforcement? No, I've not done that, and we don't use the rebar in AirCrete itself. AirCrete is more than just AirCrete. It's a composite building system. So think of it like a lot of the cheap doors that people buy that they have on their houses. They seem really hard. You can beat on those doors. You can't easily get through them. But in the center of that door is a piece of styrofoam or other foam, something you could easily break with 2 fingers. But because it's sandwiched with a tensile strength on either side, it's actually a very formidable object to go through. Same way with most homes. You have sheetrock. Sheetrock is like really crumbly, kind of worthless on its own. And if you strip off the paper, it just falls apart. But if you have paper or the tensile fabric or fibers on the outside on both sides, now some of this stuff at an inch thick, you can actually stand on it with a 16-inch spacing and you won't even break it standing on it. So AirCrete is a little bit like that. I mean, if it makes more sense to you to think of it as industrial sheetrock, then that's essentially what you're manufacturing, is a softer substance that has good, usable compression strength, but a much weaker tensile strength. So if you've got an AirCrete wall, for example, and a question that so many people ask, can I build an underground AirCrete house? And the answer is yes and no. Yes, if you build another wall to retain the forces of the earth, but otherwise no, because the earth will push and it can break through. And this is something that has to be balanced with fiber, but that's why we don't use rebar, because by the time an event happens that would move your wall, then something so severe is happening that the AirCrete is just basically going to crumble or break or slide around that rebar. So our reinforcement is of a different type. It's spread out, where we have, on the range of 150 pounds per inch of tensile strength. Yep, more and more YouTubers are working with AirCrete variations, styrofoam, papercrete. I don't really see any advantage to adding styrofoam to AirCrete, but maybe. EPS, encapsulated polystyrene, you don't have to be epic about that, but it is a very durable product. But I find that you have to find and grind a lot of trash. And out here, if we were to do that, there would be styrofoam beads 5 miles down the road to the neighbors because of the wind. It's generally kind of a messy, trashy process, but the end product is good. It's insulating, and you can smack it with a hammer. It's probably a little more durable than AirCrete. So, you have to decide if you're willing to, grind styrofoam. Let's see. All right. Okay. New York, my county's building inspector said, along as the building is by spec, he doesn't see anything wrong with different types of materials for the structure. That's great if you got a building inspector. I will mention this too, sometimes we need a good building inspector, and if you call it cellular cement and you give them some data sheets from the AAC blocks, you can be in a don't ask, don't tell situation. I've even had people call it masonry structures, and that was okay, because it's sort of masonry, it's just a softer masonry. So yep, and we'll mention this too, or North Carolina, if you're building and you're in an area with snow loads, you do want to actually do the engineering. Like in our courses, we talk about how to do the engineering to make a safe structure, how to make sure your pounds per square inch are, so much lower than what the material can support that there's a massive safety margin. And if you embed posts or beams in the structure and you put that roof up, then you basically have, there's no load whatsoever, and it's completely safe. So certainly you could do that. But I do tend to agree to find unincorporated areas, because you either have to, again, take legal responsibility to make people stand up to what's for lawful. And just as a hint, if you wanted to play around with some things, you could maybe write a particular department a letter and say, well, will you sign a piece of paper under the penalty of perjury, under your public oath to uphold the Constitution, that I don't have the right to pursue happiness or shelter? And you'll find very quickly that people that will actually take responsibility for the words that are coming out of their mouth are pretty much zero in the public space. Their bonds can be snagged and could be profitable, but I'll just leave it at that, because so much is possible if you're willing. How well does AirCrete do with integration into existing stick-built structures? Well, if you're adding on beside a structure, it'll integrate fine. If you're talking about filling up cavities of wood with AirCrete, you kind of really have to maybe rethink that. AirCrete is light, but still for every 6 cubic feet, you have, in the neighborhood of 92 to 94 pounds of weight that would be in that space. So how do you know that your floor is actually designed to support it? Secondly, AirCrete, if it's going to cure strong, needs to stay moist and, of course, is naturally dripping wet with water running out of it for some time. How's your wood going to hold up to being soaked and saturated in water for a period of time? So, depends on how you're integrating that AirCrete. And certainly AirCrete is a roof. We're doing AirCrete roofs on 2 of our Adobe structures at the flat AirCrete roof, but those are experimental. And I certainly would never put AirCrete into the attic space of an existing building because it's substantially heavy. Heck, I've seen houses where they hang a 500-pound chandelier and the whole ceiling and even the roof just bows downward. So, it does not integrate into ceilings of existing houses for certain. Yeah, Edwin, everybody's on the international building codes as far as I know. Everybody in the States has basically commanded that we will use the international building code. Some places may still kind of operate in dual positions where they'll use the uniform building code, or they may use the international, or both. Yeah. So kind of same thing, yeah. Engineered plans, yeah. You can work with an engineer, and sometimes you can find engineering architects. Again, if you find an engineer that will actually engineer and do the work to look up the codified cellular cement, what the strengths are, calculate the loads, look at the snow loads, and just look at all the data and just add the numbers up for you and then give you a seal of approval, then that's great. I find that many engineers don't do much engineering. They just kind of copy and paste what they've been doing all along, and they make great money without engaging their minds. And I'm not saying everyone does that, but that's been a far too frequent experience. Okay, about bringing common law back into our courts. Common law is not really great either. If you remember the original Constitution, which would be the common law, the law of the land, was written for them and their posterity. It was written as basically a charter for an organization to limit their power, and your rights don't come from those laws. And also, you have to comprehend that the law does exist. I wasn't prepared for this kind of discussion, but to paraphrase loosely, what happened some time back, and I don't remember the exact year, is we started operating a new. We have all these court systems and all the stuff going on, and they decided that it was inefficient. So they rolled everything into one court. So in one court, you have administrative court, which is admiralty jurisdiction, and then you move from admiralty jurisdiction, administrative law. I said that wrong. Administrative law is the first level of court. And that's where you go in, you say, I got my rights. And he says, go to jail, do not pass go, do not collect $200. And you're wondering what just happened. How can he do that? Well, it's because you're in there arguing in the public. Public means government. You're not having a real trial. It's an administrative procedure. That means there's a license, a contract, an agreement, or an assumption that binds you to that. If you challenge their jurisdiction, you'll find that actually you can't do that if you, for example, have a driver's license or you haven't corrected your lawful status with the State Department, then you're automatically assumed to be a citizen, and the court has ruled that basically they're just going to steamroll you and ignore you because they don't have to prove jurisdiction. They don't have to give you any rights because you're operating as an administrator and as a federal employee of the U.S. And by the way, the U.S. is not the USA. The spelling matters, meanings matter, words matter. And when you dig into that, you'll find a very big surprise. But you can operate above and beyond constitutional law and common law because it comes from creation. It comes from the very essence and fact of existence. And that's where certain maxims of law play in. Moving out of admiralty law, you move in typically if the judge leaves and comes back, or dismisses and comes back 30 days later. Often you've moved from administrative law into an admiralty law situation. And again, you've got claims and contracts and damages. If you can get them to move out of that, you can potentially move into common law. But they don't tell you these things because they also passed a gag order. They combined at law, your constitutional law, with admiralty, with maritime law, with equity. And then they said that where there's a conflict between law and equity, equity always prevails. And equity is where you want to be. Equity is truth and fact, whereas the legal world is purely fiction, and everything is assumption and presumption. And as they say in their own words, no fact shall be tried in court. So look into figuring out how you can operate inside of that law. For example, if you go in and you have a traffic ticket, something simple, no big deal. You got Supreme Court cases that say it's not a crime, but they've harmed you. They've arrested you, right? There was no due process. They're obviously not obeying the Constitution, because otherwise they would have to, get an indictment, hold a trial, find you guilty, and sentence you before depriving you of a right. Whereas they can somehow magically arrest people without any due process. And so that's administrative. And when you realize that you've been damaged, you've been kidnapped, and now you've been human trafficked for money, then you probably have an equitable claim for losses and damages. So you can go around for a private meeting in chambers. If you're doing equity, you cannot quote law, but you can get in there and come back as the plaintiff, suck those other false legal color of law legal garbage up into a real court where only fact and truth and interest and damages matter, and then you as the plaintiff will win, because you don't ever win as the defendant, because you're basically the surety for a trust. So yeah, I don't agree that you need to hang anybody. You don't. You can't blame those people up there for taking advantage of us bowing our knees and submitting. If we learn to stand on our own and we take responsibility for our own lives, there's nothing they can do about that. But you have to be willing to stand up to, see, what was the famous quote? Give me liberty or give me death. If you're not there, then probably you're not prepared mentally to have freedom, because we don't need to be belligerent or hostile toward anyone. We simply need to learn who we are and stand on who we are, and we need to stop volunteering to be, some people call it the straw man. We need to stop pretending to be a person, a corporation, an individual, a human. You're none of those things. Stop accepting titles. A Mr. is the lowest subordinate on a naval vehicle. Do not accept titles. And stop answering in the false name. There's some people that are really on about how that's actually idolatry, because we're holding an image of something that's supposed to represent us, but it's not the same thing at all. And I can't really get into a lot of details on that. We keep a lot of those discussions in our workshops, and in the private, because we don't engage in public controversy. It's all the world, including the court where they play games, is a stage. You've got a magi straight who's great at magic tricks. You've got a jury in a box who's not part of the conversation. And when you're done, you or your attorney, because you showing up mentally incompetent and attorneying your rights, one of you will walk straight and level over to the county clerk, and you're going to sign your contract. And all contracts are negotiable, by the way. So, yeah, we can absolutely learn to quit volunteering. So, Dustin, your mix collapse, I think got too much water, or the amount of Drexel you used. It's possible. You've got to be weighing that foam. Make sure you're coming in at 95 grams per quart/liter. And maybe check it before you do your mix and after to see if your air regulator is drifted, because sometimes water gets in that regulator, and then when you switch things off and on, the little mechanical vibrations make that air regulator shift. But what you should be getting into your mix is about 5 gallons of water in the form of foam added to 5 gallons of or it depends how big your cement bag is, but typically 5 gallons of water for a 92-pound bag of cement. And if it was too watery, then it was just too watery. Drexel, you might even want to up the amount you use to 1 ounce per gallon. It seems to do a little better that way. And again, make sure you're shaking that Drexel. Small scale mixing is a little different than doing large 6 cubic foot batches, and that can be a little bit difficult to get down. I mean, it could have been overbeaten or underbeaten. That's the art of mixing AirCrete, right? Small scale, it can be hard. Like the smallest scale that I find practical is a 5-gallon bucket, and I actually find that usually the 5-gallon bucket batch, even though it's the same proportions of everything, is usually a little stronger and less deflating. So maybe you just got too much water in there. So definitely dip your toe back into AirCrete. Yep, Honeydew Carpenter's got a lot of honeydews to do. He's done some good things out there. AirCrete Harry's done some good things. Lots of information out there. So glycerin, yep. Construct poor man's fiberglass using 2 to 3 inch blocks of styrofoam panels. Frame the inside torsion boxes, formula underplaying. Yeah, absolutely. That works well. You're kind of doing the same thing. You got a soft inside, and then you got your fibrous binding outside. Absolutely, you can do that. Construction grade perlite. Well, I don't know if that title applies to anything. I do know that both perlite and vermiculite is sold down here at our construction and building supplies in massive bags. They bring it in by the truckload, so it's obviously being used for construction. Now, that's that local supplier is McCoy's. I don't know if you have one of those in your area, but you might inquire with them about getting some bulk perlite. Yep, 1800s is when the truth. The interesting thing about the whole legal thing. The country's bankrupt and nothing exists. And interestingly enough, legal tender is not only banknotes but anything that you sign. So there's things like promissory notes and international bills of exchange. I mean, who knew that we could also print our own money pretty much the way they do? Because our whole system is based on a lie. It's based on things and or not really things, but interest in things. And we are coming into this new world order, and I don't know exactly to what degree the banking system is changing. But ultimately, when you look at the Uniform Commercial Code, you find that it's like almost verbatim in parts of it, very large chunks of the Babylonian slave trade stone, which many nations have fought over, because as a maximum law, that which came first is preeminent or has authority over what came later. So when you operate under the oldest codes there are, then in their little world of imaginary playground bully, then they have more rights and they don't have to cooperate and comply with older laws. So we really are in Babylon in that we all use that trading code, which was supposedly an improvement for society, though I kind of doubt it was an improvement over freedom, but everybody wants their cultures. So, it is what it is, and I don't know where this new world reordering is going to go. If it was like the last one where, China takes a top position and they make all the decisions and police the world, if we're going to just be stupid and get ourselves in trouble, if we're going to downfall to what level, I don't know. But I do know the answer is never with them, it's with us. You and I, we have the ability to make our world. But where they've got us is in the fact that we get everything from them, hands out. I want a new car. I want some iron. I want some plastic bottles. I want some sheeting. I want. And it all comes from corporations owned by 6 or less families. And so it takes a special kind of choice and willpower to decide we're going to stand on our own, because it might mean that we're not going to have all of the conveniences and the newest and latest stuff. And I suspect that with the New World Order, they're probably going to set it up. And we've kind of already seen it mirrored with Russia, that if you don't cooperate, if your score isn't right, then you just basically get your bank shut off and you can't buy or sell anything. And I think we ultimately know that that is where it's going. If I take your video course, will I be able to build a home with my wife without any guidance? Okay, so first of all, if you take the video course and you actually go through and practice what is shown, all of the steps are there, and I tried to keep it as simplistic and short as possible, because nobody wants to watch 100 hours of video just to think, oh, what did I just see? I don't. So you can actually go into each section and look at the section and do those parts of the course. And as far as without guidance, if you've bought those courses and you've got questions or something, you can reach out to me and contact me, and I will help you in any way that I can to get on track with any problem or situation you might be having. So I'll put it this way. We had Michael. He was a 67-year-old man. He came out. He took our workshop. He couldn't really lift an entire bag of cement, but you can have your cement delivered right there, so you scoop it right out and use it. The AirCrete buckets are light. He went home, and within about 3 weeks, he had actually built himself a little AirCrete meditation studio, and has decided he's going to build his house. So can you do it? Well, it depends. I don't know your situation specifically. If you're willing, I would say that the attitude, the mindset is the number one thing that prevents most people from succeeding. I got a video that everybody loves to talk trash about on, and it's one that's called the secret ingredient of AirCrete, and that's persistence. But I would add not only persistence, it's the right attitude that I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it no matter what. And it's also realizing that you're going to have imperfections. You're going to have little failures and setbacks, but you have to keep going. Building a house, especially depending on the size, it can be overwhelming. Even after decades of building other people's houses, there were often points in project where there were so many little dangling loose ends, it just seemed like I would never get through it. But as long as you keep plugging through and taking care of what you can take care of, one thing at a time, as it comes, in the order it needs to be done, eventually it does get done. So I have to recommend what I recommend to everybody. Build something small. Build yourself a little tool storage shed, a lawnmower shed. Build yourself a dog house. Go out and practice the process on something that you don't feel overwhelmed and worried about. Something that if it breaks, it's no big deal. Something that you can see how you're interacting with the materials, and it gives you a chance to get that muscle memory and that experience built in. And with that win, with that success under your belt, you'll feel much more confident about taking on a larger project. I even recommend that you build something like, for example, your 1,000 square foot house. What if you had the slab poured, and that is a kind of a hard, sweaty job, so probably worth going and finding a crew and hiring a crew, not a company, but a crew to pour your slab. And then what if you built your master bedroom on one end and you put a little kitchenette temporarily in the corner? You could live in your master bedroom, and you could build the other pieces to completion before moving on. Of course, when you have like the pole barn type structure, where the structure is supported by poles and the whole roof is already up, that can be really advantageous in a small build, where you build on one end and you just slowly fill this thing out as you can. It is a lot of work, and it does take a lot of determination, but you would have to be the one to tell me if you can do it. Again, like Michael, if you can't lift a 92-pound bag of cement, you can have it delivered and you can scoop it. There's lots of little things you can do. Are you afraid to climb a ladder? Do you have your balance at the top of a ladder? Can you climb scaffolding to work off of scaffolding? There's so many variables there. And again, it's about the mindset of I'm going to figure out and I'm going to succeed on how to do this. Yeah, the total cost for an AirCrete structure, that's actually a good one. Let's see if I can drop this out to a screen share, and we'll try to answer that question. All right, so let's turn on our display capture, and let's just do, you know, a quick little rough guesstimate to answer that question. I was actually planning on doing a video on this later, and I probably will still come back and do a video on this. But just answer that question. Let's see if we can't mock up 1,000. Let's just make a square foot house so it makes the math easy. 1,000 square foot. Oh, I don't see a square root button on here. Okay, let's just call it 32 by 32 feet. So, I like to use Blender 3D because, quite frankly, it's free, it's powerful, it does everything I need to do. I can switch it to empirical units. Let's do 32 feet by 32 feet by, I don't know how tall your house is, let's just say it's a typical 8 foot tall. Now, you know, most houses, when they give you square footage, is usually actually the size, including the thickness of the walls. So just to make this easy, we will maintain that idea. So, you know, we'll take our cutout, and we got to take 32 feet. And I find that 8 inches is a good value of insulation for an efficient home. AirCrete is similar to normal construction, maybe 10% less insulating. But let's just say you were going to do a 5.5 inch wall. So a 5.5 inch wall, but on both sides, is 11 inches. And maybe you, I don't know, let's make the math easy. Let's just take a foot off. So it's going to be, that'll make our structure 31 by 31 feet. Go in here and we'll cut that out. So there's your basic 32 by 32,000 square foot ish structure. I guess I should be checking to make sure this is actually streaming over to YouTube. Yeah, it is. Okay. So and go up here to preferences, turn on our 3D print tools. It says it's turned on. All right, so we select this, we go to our 3D print toolbox, and we click on volume. That gives us a volume for the walls of the house. So what do we got there? 8709, and we'll round it up, cubic inches. So we got to divide that by our batches of AirCrete. So a batch of AirCrete is 6 cubic feet. A cubic feet is 1,728 cubic inches. But there's 6 of those, or 10,368 cubic inches in a batch of AirCrete. So basically that's 84 batches of AirCrete, provided you don't have much deflation. So if you want to round that up to the next nearest number, and then you want to account for siding, let's just say that it took 100 bags of Portland cement. Let's go over and see what the price of a bag of Portland cement is. I suppose it could vary based on your location. Well, that's taking forever. There we go. Do 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 do. Okay. There we go, $13.37 a bag. And by the way, Portland cement's kind of still considered a natural product, so there's no tax. And if there were, there's certain forms to deal with that. So basically the walls of your house are going to cost $1,337 in Portland cement. Plus, I'm going to say, I don't know, let's just round that way up and say $350 for your fabric that goes around your house. Now, what the heck? I hadn't checked the price lately. Let's just double that. So you're looking at $2,000-ish to build the walls of that AirCrete structure. Now, what is $2,000 for a 1,000 square foot house? That's pretty much nothing, because if you divided that by 1,000 square feet, you're now talking about $2 a square foot for your AirCrete walls. But that's not all that there is to building a structure, of course. The question then is, how much are your roof trusses going to cost to go on the roof? What kind of roofing are you going to put on? You know, what are you going to, what kind of flooring are you going to put down? What kind of appliances? What kind of paint? You see, all of those things add up the price. So it's not really just about the walls. Now, I can assure you that's a lot cheaper than buying the wood right now to build a structure of 32 by 32 square feet, because lumber, and then you got to buy insulation, you got to buy all these other things. It adds up to much more using conventional construction. But conventional construction's off the shelf, super easy, recognized by code. It's a great place to stuff rats and bugs when you get a hole in something. So, you know, you have to decide if there's properties of AirCrete that matter more to you, and then even make your comparisons of actual prices. Now, the biggest saving you ever have in building a home is whatever you choose, you're doing it yourself. That's where the savings comes, because I don't know that this is true for most parts of the country, but in East Texas, if it costs $100,000 for materials to build your house, then the labor is going to be $100,000. And so when you hire companies to do things, they're very expensive. If you can manage unskilled labor, if you can find somebody that can function on drugs, or perhaps by some miracle someone who isn't doing drugs, then you could get a good worker and get things built at a very much more affordable rate. That's another thing. If you were building a house like that at AirCrete, and you could hire, say, 2 or 3 guys for a month at $10 to $20 an hour, that actually doesn't add that much cost to your house. So hopefully that answers your questions and gets you kind of in the ballpark of where you're going. Now, the last AirCrete structure we finished, it came in at $42 per square foot. Was that just AirCrete? No. That was the AirCrete, the paint, the roof, the tile, the furniture, the air conditioning system, the batteries, the solar charger, the charge controller, the inverter. It was all of those things that add up to a lot of money. And heck, you know, it's even on a bedroom, it's like no effort to spend $1,000 just buying the furnishings to go in that room. In fact, I just spent $1,200 just buying just loose, rough furnishings, not even great furnishings for the last guest room. All right, any thoughts on sawdust and or straw bale concrete? Well, I don't really know. I haven't any experience with those. I don't particularly like to talk about things I haven't done myself. I suppose you could add wood shavings. I don't know. I think probably that would weaken the wall more than anything. Honestly, I don't think I would do it. It is possible, however, to use hydromulch, you know, that paper stuff that these landscape companies spray out on the landscape. That's a pretty decent fiber that you can mix into your AirCrete, and it's still insulating, and it definitely reduces cracking and makes for a more solid block. So whatever fibers you use, you would not want to use fiberglass because that would be basically short-circuiting your insulation and lowering the effective R value, if you will, although I don't like the term R value. It's really more about terms of BTUs per square foot per hour that goes through a wall. But anyway, yeah, I mean, it's something to consider. I've not even used the paper fibers yet. So again, I'm not going to say that it's definitely a good thing or not because I haven't done it. We used to make AirCrete, right? You get a bunch of newspapers and you chop them up with this tub and a lawnmower blade that you're dragging on an axle behind your car, and you gather trash for months to get enough, and you chop it all up, and then you cement it together, and then that paper ends up molding in a high humidity environment. So I guess it wouldn't necessarily be so different than that, except it have more air bubbles in it. Okay, yeah, so again on the perlite, I don't know about the different courses or grades. I really don't. I don't have any experience buying anything other than whatever's available from my construction sources. But that is an interesting question. But absolutely, you could add perlite or lava rock, or there's a number of things you could actually add to cement to make it insulating besides just air bubbles. Compressed stabilized earth bricks, yeah, those are nice. Again, you have to look at what you're doing. They don't provide the insulation, nor do they provide a lot of thermal mass. In my mind, if I were doing compressed earth blocks, which I do like the idea, but I also think that it takes a lot more work than doing cast earth, but not as much as rammed earth. So if I were doing those, I would tend to put a double wall of bricks, have an outer wall and an inner wall with maybe up to a foot gap, and I would fill that with whatever insulation I could get. I suppose you could even fill a wall like that up with just roughly smashed styrofoam trash cups if you wished. You could fill it up with straw. You could fill it up with just about anything, provided there's waterproofing or a membrane at the bottom to be certain that if you're using straw, moisture can't get in. So yeah, compressed earth blocks are a nice little product. Again, it depends on what your goals are. Is it to be energy efficient? Is it just to get a quick, cheap house up? And I say quick, I'm not sure making those blocks. In fact, I'm sure that making those blocks is not nearly as fast as casting our monolithic AirCrete rectangular houses like we're doing. But it's definitely out there, and it's definitely on the board to consider. All right, so for house designs, have a look at floor plans for modular homes. You can get the blueprints. Yeah, there's tons of blueprints and floor plans online. And, if you're seeking to get code approval, or we've had some people actually kind of manage to slip in bank approval for their masonry structure. They just found a floor plan that they wanted and then copied it. And then when they actually built it, they made the changes they wanted because they actually knew what they wanted. Don't be afraid to hand draw those, as long as it's very clear, where you have multiple layers and this one's got the floor, this one's got the plumbing, this one's got the electric, this one's got the floor or the wall spacing, this one's got the doors and windows, this one's got the lighting. As long as you could draw all that up, there's nothing wrong with doing it by hand. Lots of floor plans out there for free. If you're building domes or round houses, you can look at Monolithic Dome Institute. They got tons of round floor plans. Some of them are actually pretty good. Is it true that earth bag homes are $3,000? Well, it's honestly been about 10 years since I looked at the cost of the bags to do the earth. I will say this, in humid and wet environments, more often than not, I'm finding that people are having a very hard time keeping it sealed. So what ultimately happens is water will find its way into a crack, it gets the dirt wet, and then like all summer long and all winter long, you have a high humidity situation in the house that actually makes it very uncomfortable. And then some of those people have then purchased a vinyl membrane to go over the house, and that costs $3,000 to $5,000 for the membrane. And as you saw in the example, you can build a 1,000 square foot house for a couple $1,000s worth of AirCrete. So I don't know. Earthbag was invented to go to the moon by a guy that was, he kind of, in his own words, said he didn't intend for people to live in it. It is kind of like a substance. Well, okay. You look at Earth ships, right? Well, the tires allow you to ram Earth. You don't have to mix clay and sand and get the perfect mix. But Earth bags also do that. It allows you to put anything in there, and as long as the bag is intact and it's not been in the sun too long, it contains the dirt. So really, it's pretty cheap to build. Is the labor extreme on Earth bag? It depends on the size you're doing. It to me seems like a bit of a hassle, actually, to be able to get the dirt in the bag. Now, there was a guy who invented an attachment for an excavator, so you could just scoop the dirt up and it would just fill the bags, and then you could put it down in position. But then there you are renting more expensive machinery. So I don't know. I talked to, I can't remember the name of the YouTube channel. There's a family that they built earth bag homes for them and their kids. And I think, I'm not sure what state they're in, but they were in a fairly dry climate. And I actually talked to them about their house. And they did say, like the one kid, for example, really preferred to set his blankets and stuff out on his little balcony and sleep outside once summer got going, because it did get a little uncomfortably hot through the summer, and then in the winter time it would get a little uncomfortably cold. So it's not really thick enough to provide a lasting amount of insulation, so you also have to pump energy into them, and I'm not sure what that rate of transfer is through those. Dry stacking and interlocking. Let's see. If that's in, let's see. Yeah, dry stacking earth blocks, if that's what you're talking about, or dry stacking AirCrete blocks. I don't know. I mean, Mother Earth did have that article about some dry stacked cinder blocks that they just put that fiber and cement on the surface of, and it was actually stronger than the mortared together blocks. Maybe, I don't know. Again, I haven't done that, so I can't speak to the validity or the durability of something like that. It is an intriguing thought, though. So, yep. We've been running a while, so I guess we're going to go ahead and bring this to an end since we've had this running so long. But, just consider what's appropriate for you and your climate. AirCrete, it's insulation. The shell itself doesn't cost a lot. And whenever you're on a budget, if you're like some of the kids making minimum wage, you do have to consider what it's actually going to take to make it livable to you. But also consider that you don't have to do everything all at once. Build that master bedroom, stick a $99 window unit in it, stick in a propane heater temporarily, and find out, what's the minimum you can get by on to save more money. If you're in that position. I know a lot of people have contacted me. They're on limited incomes and they want to do something. And sometimes that also requires that we make changes to our life, and they may be uncomfortable for a while. It's kind of like that delayed gratification thing, right? But to me, it's like I would be willing to do anything to move back into a good position. If I had to live under a bridge, if I had to have my own mini Burning Man and live inside of a foam hexayurt with a window unit stuck through the side on a plywood floor, I certainly would be willing to do whatever it takes. Borrow somebody's backyard, borrow their couch. There's also opportunities where people want these structures built. So sometimes you can work out a deal like, hey, I'll come and build you your yoga studio in your backyard out of AirCrete. In exchange, I want to live in it for a year or two. So there are those opportunities out there. You just have to start thinking and brainstorming. And if you really get that process going, you'll find that the possibilities are almost unlimited. So, yeah, earth insulates at least 1 foot thick. Yeah, we got a guy out here that also really believed that, and he's got 18-inch thick earth bag walls. and he now has 2 window units in it, and during the summer still retreats to his RV to stay comfortable in. So it doesn't really insulate, though it does slow. It transfers at a different rate. I guess you could call it insulation, but it's really more of a thermal mass. And once you get it hot or once you get it cold, it's going to be very hard to turn that around. It's thermal inertia, right? What do I think of buying lands and homes for community and sell each home? Yeah, I've actually have a lot of offers where people want me to do that. I'm not in a position to do that right now, and we're still building this education center for all forms of alternative building and lifestyle design, counter economies, freedom, agora, volunteerism, and whatnot. Maybe once I'm done with that project, I could consider it. But basically, as a general rule of thumb, like I said before, you could say it cost you, say $10,000 to finish a small 1-bedroom home with all the appliances finished, ready to move into, sewer, water, electric, all that ready to go. If it cost you $10,000, you could sell it for $20,000 cash. You could maybe just go for these crazy high prices right now and somebody be willing to take it. You could also finance it, and by the time the interest is paid off in 25 or 30 years, you'll make about $60,000 to $70,000 selling that home. So it certainly is an opportunity, and I'm sure that if I had a dozen AirCrete houses built, I could sell them like probably by the end of the week. So it is a possibility. And as far as resale value, that's entirely based upon the interpretation. Most people want normal, and they're frightened, terrified, and abusive with their speech toward anything that's not normal. So they're not going to put their money in it, and quite likely the value of things in our society is only based upon what a bank will loan for it. So is it a resale value? Not when a bank won't finance it. Can you get around that? Probably. But I will mention there's also private investment, adventure capitalist people, if you will, who will look at something, make their own decision, and then they can loan you the money as a man-to-man or woman-to-man so that you can get a loan. Now, it's out there, surprisingly more than you realize. But those interest rates are typically a little higher. If I was building a community with AirCrete, I think I've actually been kicking around the idea of building houses, and then the buy-in to the community is that you have to buy the house at double the price of the materials. That would fund the community, that would fund common projects, it would provide a living for whoever's building, and it would probably have a continuing income. So definitely something we've been looking at. Yeah, you should try just building a small interlocking compressed earth brick wall, Wild Rose, and put some fabric on that thing, or some fiber and cement, and then beat it up. See what happens. I suspect it could actually do pretty well. 2-story dome structures, yep, they're doable. You're going to need a scissor lift to build the thing. Also, you need an intermediary bond beam in the middle of the wall to attach your flooring to, and you got to be careful that as the dome heats and grows and cools and contracts, you don't want to have a hard, rigid floor that will crack your dome because it's shrinking in cold weather. You have to provide slip joints that the floor can sit on, that allows things to move, or you have to build them supported entirely upon interior wall structures or post. So, can I create portable AirCrete homes? I get that question fairly often. I'm going to say not a great idea, because AirCrete is a more brittle structure, and I don't know, maybe if once you wrapped it in fabric and secured it, it would be fine. But ultimately, this thing's going to be getting beat up going down the road. I've seen a lot of trailer houses that are just falling apart by the time they get where they're going after a long trip, and that's with glue and nails. I would be very concerned about cracking of the structure. If that portable structure's roof were supported by steel posts, for example, I would feel a lot better about that. I think that in that case it could work. Yeah, as far as fabrics and what we use a fiberglass fabric now. We were using stuff that was made to be embedded in both cement and asphalt as a commercial roofing fabric, things like APOC 482S. However, what I find is we got a lot of people coming out doing workshops, many of which who have never picked up a tool before. And even though I speak instructions repeatedly, it doesn't get through to a lot of people that you got to put on a heavy coat of cement, you got to do it quickly while it's wet, put the fabric over, and you have to really work that cement through the fabric, at least like 11 or 12 passes with a hand or with a trowel. You could probably make 8 passes, but you got to pull that cement through the fabric so that the bond coat can bond all the way through. And for that reason, we were having a lot of hollow spots. You'd be tapping on the wall and it sounds hollow because the fabric's not bonded to the wall properly. So we switched to a fiberglass mesh. It just happens to be stronger and more fireproof. So that's where we're at with that right now. Okay, so ATSM values are going to be found under cellular cement, not AirCrete, cellular cement. It's actually codified and it's in there. And what we build is considered a class 5 cellular cement, if you want to look up the codification on that. Yep. So there you go. I hope you guys found this time useful. Like I said, I'm kind of thinking about kicking around the idea of maybe starting to release more of my videos in a live format like this. Because honestly, I get behind. I got a lot of things to do. When I leave the computer, sometimes I miss comments. I try to go back and answer them as best as I can, but it seems like, I look back down later and there's comments, like a year's worth of comments somewhere that somehow didn't show up in my feed for me to answer them. And this just seems like it might be a better way to proceed with doing these videos. What is the name of the fiberglass mesh? I don't remember, but you can just Google a stucco mesh. Most stucco meshes will probably work. I don't remember the weights, but you can get data sheets on them to find out what their tensile strength is. It tends to require a little more finishing work if you want a perfectly smooth wall. If you're kind of doing a textured wall, or you're taking your trowel and you're making patterns, the Fresno finish or whatever, then you can you don't really have to worry about that. But if you want the perfect smooth finish, that fiberglass mesh does require 3 or 4 extra little finishing passes before you get it perfect. And on that note, it's not a bad idea to go ahead and add some sand potentially to that mix. It does give it a texture that some people find disagreeable, but it makes for a pretty dang tough finish coat that needs very little maintenance. So there you go. I'm going to go ahead and jump off of here because we've been on here a while, and I want to thank all of you for coming. I appreciate you. Keep up the, I'm not going to call it a fight, but keep looking to build the future you want to build. Keep seeking your freedom, and in that is probably the hardest thing in the world, is to get crystal clear to define in one sentence or maybe one paragraph exactly what it is that you want out of life. And once you can define that one thing that you really want in all of its glory and detail, then you can have it. Because it's the indecision, it's the not knowing, it's the not taking action, it's the not believing in ourselves, it's having doubt and therefore not taking action. It's all of these things that prevent us from creating the life we want. We stay stuck in a job. We can create an online business even while we're working. We're running classes right now showing people how to actually create an online business and make an income. Income's the wrong word, but how to exchange value for value. And often when you get very clear on what it is you want and what it does for you, you're able to much more quickly get that because you find out it doesn't cost nearly as much as you think. And once you have a plan made, you can execute that plan and you can get it done. And sometimes that starts from where you're at and working backwards through the process, reverse engineering it all the way to from where you are to where you want to be. My lifestyle has actually been very good and enjoyable in terms of the fact that we don't have the bills we used to have. Like, we could literally forage off the land. As soon as we get our greenhouses up and running, we'll be eating a lot more produce, a lot of good fresh foods, and we have a solar power here, so our initial expense is spent. And now that gives us the freedom to do as we wish. Honestly, right now our bills are high for us because we don't have our food systems constructed yet, and we're having to buy all of our food from the store. So that puts the monthly bills at a whopping, let's say $650 a month. It's so easy to earn $650 a month by setting up an online business. I don't want to say it's effortless, but it's fast and it's easy. And so sometimes we have to evaluate when we're going to build our houses. Do we really need to start with the income first? Would we have enough if we kept the last month's rent, or saved what we could to keep the last month's rents and retreat to a purchased piece of property and even live in a car if we had to? Would that make our situation better? If you're just wanting to live a different and better life and you're wanting to build a massive house out of AirCrete, get very clear on what it is AirCrete does for you. For example, what does it do for me? AirCrete doesn't off-gas. It's basically non-toxic. You can't even do an earth and plaster finish on the inside, whether that's wheat paste or seaweed or whatever you might be throwing in there. You can create a natural non-off-gassing plaster. As long as you don't buy particle board furniture and lots of plastic electronics, then you have a very clean environment. It's very affordable. It makes it possible. Like we said, just the shell of a house costing a couple of grand, that's not bad. But if you're just wanting to buy a house made or just move in and have it done for you, that's more the typical mindset. And AirCrete's kind of geared toward do it yourself. So then you got to either learn the process and oversee someone else doing it, and maybe you could hire a company. There are some few out there that'll do it, though the experience has been less than stellar for some of the people I've talked to. But just get clear on exactly what it is you want. Well, no, you can't just use AirCrete anywhere you mention. Whenever you're asking for permission from your masters, think of it this way. Everybody wants freedom, and we all want to unload responsibility. So we want insurance so that when we drive our cars, if we hit someone, we don't have to pay for it. Sounds great. But then we get angry when the government passes a law that says we have to wear seat belts and we have to slow down and we have to obey. Well, you're asking someone else to take responsibility for you, and they're only going to do it for a profit. So they have the right then to demand that you be safe as best that they see it, even if that's the opposite of what you want. So same thing with AirCrete. If you're asking for permission for something, they want to know that it's safe and have gone through all the politically correct processes and gone through all the crazy expensive laboratory testing and certifications that are necessary. You can buy AAC blocks if you want to go code approved, because you can buy them and have them trucked in. At this point, I believe that an AAC block is roughly 4 times the cost of AirCrete, and then the cost of shipping almost doubles that again. But again, the biggest savings in building your own home is doing it yourself. So no, you can't use AirCrete just anywhere where the code is concerned, unless you use it as non-load bearing infill and you get a variance, or you don't ask and you don't tell and you can get things done anyway. So anyway, I'm going to go. Arches, vaults, domes are great. Yeah, they You got arch houses, you know, like 16, 20 foot wide, nice and long, porch front and back, very nice, self-supporting. Walls can be almost straight enough to hang a picture. Furniture's a little easier, especially cabinetry, than a dome is. But anyway, thank you guys. Y'all have a really great and wonderful day. Keep striving to build the world we want to see, build the world that you want to see in your life. Don't wait for the authorities to get it right. Don't wait for someone else to solve your problems. Don't take no for an answer. Get the mindset right. Get a clear vision and execute and take action on that, and you'll get there. You will. And when you arrive, the feeling is like none other. In fact, there's no words for the feelings I have when I'm warm and safe and snug this winter inside the AirCrete structure built by my own hands with a raging cold winter wind blowing, and I'm just as safe and warm and comfortable as I can be, knowing that I can do it anytime. Even if I move, I can do it again. Knowing that I have empowered myself by learning new skill sets, by learning new knowledge. And that's what I want to share with you guys is, if nothing else, the vision of get clear on exactly what you want in life. And if what you want in life means you don't want to obey because you've had the glasses on and you've seen the signs, then that's going to mean learning to take some responsibilities, learning how to correct things and situations we've done wrong. In terms of building a house, it's going to be a matter of counting the cost, making sure we can do it. And it may mean that we need to move to areas that have freedom, you know, places that don't have somebody breathing down your neck and restricting you. You know, there's a lot of states, there's a lot of places in the country where when you're in the county, there's really not any building requirements or inspection. There's only things like septic system inspection. So consider what it is you want, get very clear on it, and if you want things to change in your life, then things are going to have to change. So bless you all. Have a great and wonderful evening, and I will look forward to seeing you all on another video.